1.5, motion and time. I don't know why these aren't just chapter 5 or what have you, but anyway, it's the first segment, which is all the elements and principles for the most part. Okay, so this is part 1, chapter 1.5. Motion and time weren't originally part of elements and principles, but as we had more motion pictures and video and different technology, kinetic work that became more accepted, they began to include motion and also time as a media, or as an element. So motion occurs, of course, when an object changes location or position, and it's directly linked to time because emotion's never, you throw a ball, it's not in the same place in the same second, if that makes sense. It's always moving. So artists communicate motion in a few different ways, implying time, the illusion of time. Motion is also actual. We'll look at that. So implied motion is the first one we're going to start with, and that's usually in static works of art. So it's not actually moving, it's completely frozen in time, but we see certain visual cues like diagonals, which we're about to look at. So we don't actually see the motion happening, but there are visual clues. In Apollo and Daphne, a Bernini sculpture, really beautiful carved marble from the Baroque era. Just really gorgeous, fleshed, qualities and stone and wood, all kinds of things happening here. Apollo is chasing Daphne. Her father turns her into a tree. That's our Greek myth here. And we see these diagonal arms. There's an arm, his arms, her arms, the legs, the feet. She is kind of becoming elevated as the tree form is pulling her up and absorbing her. The hair's flowing, the clothing's flowing, so we know that there's movement and we know that there's motion. So she runs away terrified. Her father transforms her into a laurel tree. Diagonal lines and also the pivotal movement. Another one further in the book, chapter 3.8, image 19, Camille Claudel's The Waltz. Very similar in the sense that we have diagonals, we have a twist, we have flowing drapery, so we know that there's movement. And our book, just by the way, will mention some works further into the book. The idea is that you're connecting these concepts throughout history and also conceptually. This is now dynamism, of a dog on a leash, another implied motion piece, and this is a futurist. This is Giacomo Balla, much later, 1912. This is a 100-year-old piece. We were just looking at a 500-year-old piece. Yeah, if my math is right, which easily could not be. I think it's 400. Okay, so our futurist people. This is early 20th century. A lot of things are happening. A lot of concepts are out there. A lot of isms. So futurism is one of the isms, not to be confused with dynamism. That's not a real art form. That's just a title here. But futurism is showing all of the moments in time in one picture plane, in one image. Okay, so the walker's feet are moving along. We see multiple walking feet, like 8 or 9 of them. We see a bunch of tail wags. We see a bunch of feet, ear moving, and the implied line of the leash. So it conveys a sense of forward motion. This is an Italian futurist. They were fascists, by the way, very pro-Nazi, but we don't judge entirely with all types of art. Not all of them were Nazis, but the futurists tend to be on that side with fascism. They thought it was fascinating, at least in the beginning. So we have these repeating marks in one plane. The illusion of motion is slightly different than implied motion. It's looking like it's moving because our eyes are deceived. It's not recording motion exactly, but it's trying to trick us into thinking that there is some actual motion when there is not. First image is Jenny Holzer, one of my all-time favorites. She just showed some work down in the Coachella Valley during the festival and in the desert environs. She does a lot of text work. So this building we're looking at is an old Frank Lloyd Wright building, very famous, Guggenheim Museum. And then she came up with this piece of text that scrolls, meaning moves up. So you would think it's real motion, but in reality, when you're looking at scrolling text, same thing as a movie or a lot of other things, you're just looking at lights going on and off, actually. So it isn't real motion, if that makes sense. This is an illusion of motion. The dots go on and off, so we think that they're moving up. So there's another word that comes up under "you are a victim" and so on. You see another phrase, one of these other phrases might come up in here, up underneath this at a different point in time. So it's illuminated in an automatic sequence. It's scrolling up, sort of, but it's not really. There's no scrolling, it's just lights going on and off. Op art, which is something that was huge in the 60s. A lot of op art artists, went out of business once the computer really got going with digital rendering, because this was hand done and measured in terms of like all these lines, all these wavy lines had to be exact and so on to create this illusion. And now you just click a couple buttons and this piece is made. So it was very disappointing to a lot of the op artists. Quite a few of them were women, and it just kind of put them out of business, unfortunately. So this is called Cataract 3, and it looks like there's waves, and if you stare at it long enough, your eyes want to create that movement, and it seems like it's vibrating, but it is not. This is a physiological movement of the human eye, and we see it because of the sharp contrast and the hard edge graphics. So that's op art, and no accident that it became popular during the height of hallucinogenic